Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, good job. Okay, let's see. In January of 2003, the MAA established the Henry L. Alder Award for Distinguished Teaching by a beginning college or university mathematics faculty member to honor beginning college or university faculty whose teaching has been extraordinarily successful and whose effectiveness in teaching undergraduate mathematics is shown to have influence beyond their own classrooms. Over the next few minutes, hour and 15 minutes or so, we're going to hear from three extraordinary successful teachers, Drs. Abraham Edwards, Allison Lynch, and Andrea Arrauza Rivera. I'll introduce each one briefly before their presentation, and then after they present, there'll be about 5 minutes for questions, 5 minutes for us to transition, and then we'll continue on with our next speaker. And I just want to let you know that my remarks are somewhat brief, but you can find their full citation in the prize booklet, and I encourage you to go and read through that. So let me start by finding Allison's citation here. So Dr. Allison Lynch of California State University, Monterey Bay, is an influential teacher and leader who has used her expertise in research-based pedagogies to improve student learning and transform the mathematics curriculum at her institution and beyond. Dr. Lynch uses a variety of student-centered pedagogies to enhance student learning. In her Intro to Proofs course, for example, she utilizes an inquiry-based learning approach and activities that get students to read before class so they can take advantage of class time to work collaboratively. She also incorporates a proof portfolio project in which students write and revise proofs throughout the semester before submitting a polished final product. One student shared how much they appreciated her role of coach versus being the main fountain of knowledge, and how this course structure helped them facilitate their own learning. Perhaps Dr. Lynch's greatest strength is her exceptional ability to share her expertise in teaching and learning practices and to mentor others in how to implement them. At the department level, Dr. Lynch spearheaded curricular redesign efforts for Precalculus and a first semester calculus course. Her nominators shared that her colleagues fully embraced these readings and once fully implemented by the department, the D-fail withdrawal rate for both courses fell dramatically. Equally impressive is the PD that Dr. Lynch provided her colleagues during the COVID-19 pandemic. More recently, Dr. Lynch was awarded a $100,000 grant from the California Educational Learning Lab to implement standard-based grading in Calculus 1 at her institution and at Harnell College, a public college in Salinas, California. For those reasons and many more, we are very excited to welcome Dr. Allison Lynch. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. So when I first started teaching as a new faculty member, I discovered something that I didn't expect. Teaching can be lonely. In that first year, I feel like I spent all of my time in my office, desperately preparing for class, teaching for classes that went okay, and then furiously trying to figure out how to do better. And I was surrounded with supportive colleagues, but at the time I really felt that I was on my own. But in the semesters that followed and the years that followed, I realized that it doesn't have to be. And in fact, I'm at my best as an educator when I'm working as part of a community. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the idea that building community, whether among educators or within a classroom, enables us to take on big things together. Now, what do I mean by big things? I really mean things that seem insurmountable to take on alone. In my not so long time as a faculty member, I feel like my department, my campus, my region has faced a lot of those. But the one that I want to focus on today is probably one that you have experience with, either as a teacher or a learner. And that's teaching online during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I can say without a doubt the loneliest I've felt as an educator was that spring 2020 when we all moved online suddenly. And I'm sure my loneliness had something to do with this. So not only was I isolated from my colleagues, I was isolated from my students. I felt fortunate every time I got to see one of their faces or hear one of their voices, because a lot of the time I didn't. And so moving into the summer of 2020, my university system announced really early, I think May of 2020, that we were going to be virtual for the fall semester, and later announced that we would continue to be virtual for the spring semester. So we knew going into the summer, we had a big challenge ahead of us. How could we, as an entire faculty, our whole department, be ready for the fall semester to teach online effectively in that short time and at scale? So some of the particular challenges that we talked about were, first of all, we had, as a faculty, no experience teaching online. I know some of you probably were teaching online in some capacity before that. No one in my department had taught online. There was also an information overload. I know everyone was really trying to be helpful in this time of transition. The MAA held webinars. Social media was flooded with online tech tools for the classroom, and not to mention the extensive literature of online and distance learning that was already out there. Way too much for an educator to dig through and try and implement in the moment. Not to mention the question of would any of it actually work for our students during a pandemic? That was really unclear. And finally, a lot of my colleagues are parents or have family members who are older or were immunocompromised. Things that, as important as it was to teach effectively, were a little bit more important. So that was our question. What can we do to make this work at scale for all of our faculty, for all of our students? So here's what I proposed. First of all, figure out what we need. So we couldn't learn everything. So we surveyed our faculty to figure out what were the things that we most needed to know to do our jobs in the fall. Second of all, take those faculty who maybe didn't have as much responsibility. I was one of those, but people who really wanted to take the time and could take the time to dig into those resources, not all of them, but take on a small piece of that and figure out what is it that's useful? What can we all benefit from? And then share it with our colleagues. So those faculty who were willing, first of all, they were paid, thanks to the CARES Act. We were able to fund our facilitators and our participants for this. But then they would hold a session asynchronously and synchronously to share what they had learned and also model those best practices. All while throughout these sessions building community among our faculty. So we had that educator network to draw on. So this is what we did, and here's just a brief look at our sessions and our facilitators. You can look at the topics there. Kind of covers a lot of the big things that we needed to know. How to engage students, how to build community in the classroom, how to assess in a meaningful and effective way, how to balance that issue of being flexible while also maintaining our workload and supporting students and meeting deadlines, all those important things. But I also put up this slide because I want to highlight, first of all, my amazing colleagues who did this work, but also reflect that the people who facilitated these reflected the full diversity of our department. And you can see some of that in terms of gender diversity and racial diversity, but also what you can see is rank diversity. We had everyone from lecturers to associate professors. We had no full professors because we had barely any of them, but they helped with the funding, so that was great. We had experience diversity, so we had folks who had been teaching for a long, long time, and folks who had just finished their first year of teaching. As well as course diversity. These folks across so many of us pretty much taught every course on our books. So they were able to bring in those pieces, connect to intro stats, connect to abstract algebra, all the things that we would be teaching. not to go into too many of these details in this short talk, but we had sessions scheduled on pairs of consecutive days, not to overwhelm people, to be kind of on all summer long. We had an asynchronous portion leading into a 2-hour synchronous portion on Zoom. Participants were paid for each pair of workshops, so you didn't have to do all of them, but you kind of, because of bureaucracy, we had to pay in pairs. And I think most importantly about the format is the activities that happened in the asynchronous and synchronous portion were not focused on telling, they were focused on bringing people together. So engaging participants in dialogue with each other, eliciting what they had tried, what worked, what they were concerned about, what they wanted to try, getting that feedback from each other as we went through the process. And it worked. So it worked in a number of ways. So first of all, we got incredible buy-in. So 24 of our 26 department faculty participated in at least one pair of the workshops. At the end of that semester, we surveyed the faculty, and 16 of the 17 respondents said that they had used some of what we did in those sessions in their teaching. And 14 of the 17 reported that it had increased their confidence in their ability to use online teaching tools in their classroom. And the third thing, which I think feels like the most important to me, even though I don't have data to back it up, is that faculty collaborated more and discussed their teaching together more that semester than any of the previous semesters. So why was it effective? Here's what I think. I think, first of all, we were working towards a common shared goal. We came together to take on this big thing in a group. Second of all, we drew on the diversity of skills, knowledge, and backgrounds of our participants, both in terms of the facilitators and in terms of participants who were there. Through these sessions, we established trust and interdependence among the participants, so our faculty were able to genuinely ask questions, suggest things, get feedback that was supportive and not threatening, even when we were working across ranks and kind of across whatever all the different potential status challenges we could have. And finally, the sessions were accessible. So even if somebody being online made things easier in that regard, but even if people could not be there for the full 2 hours or couldn't be there with cameras on for the full 2 hours, there was so much available through our asynchronous modules as well as after the online sessions that all of our faculty could benefit. Okay, so that I recognize is a lot of we. And this is kind of supposed to be about me. But this is also the story of me, because the things that I am proudest of in my career so far are the times when I have brought people together and built community to take on these big challenges. One of my strongest assets as an educator is bringing out the best in other people. It also reflects how I approach my teaching. This idea of building community, because everything that I've said about teaching is also true about learning. So why build community in the classroom? Same reasons. Learning can be lonely too. I remember my first year as an undergrad, I don't think I talked to a single person, student or professor, in my math classes. It wasn't until my second year that I started, that people invited me to join study groups. I realized that my professors weren't terrifying and I could maybe ask them questions. But that first year, I remember sitting in the basement of my dorm, bashing my head against the desk, trying to solve that differential equations mixing problem all by myself. And also, building community allows us to take on big things together, and there are a lot of big things in learning, including just learning. Learning mathematics is a big thing, and we can do it better together. Finally, how do we do it in the classroom? Again, same stuff. We establish, let me stop saying we, because I should say some I's. I work to establish a common shared goal, and maybe that goal in the classroom context is obvious. It's learning the content, passing the class, earning an A. But the important thing there is making it a shared goal, not an individual goal. So it's not just on you to figure out how to learn the material. It's something that we are doing together. Second, draw on the diversity of skills, knowledge, and backgrounds of, I said participants here, the students and the faculty member. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we figure out what those are. We have conversations. We find out what it is that you're coming into this classroom with, what you know, what you do, what you care about. And then I find ways to make those things relevant and make those things visible, you know? Everyone is bringing different mathematical skills, personal skills in there, which are incredibly relevant to the learning work we do, but they're not always visible and they're not always valued. So that's my role, bringing those things, making those things visible. Then establishing trust and interdependence among the participants. If I want my students to be able to ask questions, if I want them to work together, they need to, like my colleagues, they need to be able to trust that the student sitting next to them isn't going to tear them down when they ask that question, isn't going to disparage them when they make a mistake. So we do a lot of work in my classes to establish and reinforce those norms. What is it that we expect of each other in that learning environment so that we can all thrive? And finally, designing courses to be accessible to all. Now, I admit this was something that actually was easier during COVID, because we did so much stuff asynchronously, and I'm still working to make that better in my online classroom. But that's the work of teaching, right? There's always places to improve. So I want to conclude with a few thank yous. So first of all, huge thank you to the MAA for this recognition, and also for the role that the MAA has played in my development in my career. So first of all, here's my Project Next cohort there in that picture. Project Next was a great kickoff to my career in figuring out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do as an educator. But also opportunities to speak at meetings like this. I think, like myself, the MAA has some room to grow in that accessible to all area too. I look at that picture and a lot of those folks aren't here today because it's not safe for them to be here. And so I look forward to the MAA working on that in years to come. I need to thank the first academic community that I really felt a part of. My advisor, my PhD advisor was Paul Terwilliger, and you can see him there in 2 of those photos. We called ourselves the students of Paul Team T, for Team Terwilliger, and they were my everything in grad school. They were the reason that I got through grad school, and they're all such deeply caring and thoughtful people. So I really want to acknowledge and thank them, as well as my advisor, who, as a mathematician who is singly focused on research, he could have not been more supportive of my wish to pursue a teaching-focused path. I need to thank my colleagues. I know you all probably think you're in great departments, but I have to tell you, my department is the best department. My colleagues are the most incredible educators and people. They care so deeply for students and their learning. The picture on the left is us getting caught in the rain at MathFest 2019 after we got stuck across the bridge when Trump was in town and they shut down the bridge. Whole story. But they're the reason that I'm able to do what I'm able to do today. And finally, I need to thank my students, because obviously my students are why I do what I do. And I'm so grateful that every semester they're willing to take that journey with me, to be in community with their peers and do what they need to do and help me do what I need to do to help them learn. So I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. And we have time for some questions if you would like to step up to a mic or just stand up and ask your question.
My outdoor voice. Can you say a little more about moving students from the individualistic goal of I want the X and I like my grade to achieving that as a shared goal?
Yeah, and I think it starts from grading structures. from the first step, right? Making a class and setting up policies so things are not competitive. You're not competing to get the A, you know. If we all get there, we all get the A. But then also providing those opportunities in class for students to reflect and discuss together what's working, what's not, you know, where we need to go as a classroom community. And putting myself in part of that dialogue, right? So it's not just them, I'm part of that community too.